Hello, this is Marjory Wildcraft, and I'm the founder of the Grow Network, which is the online home of a global community of people who are producing their own food and medicine. The Grow Network's purpose is to stop the destruction of the earth, and our catalyzing statement is homegrown food on every table. And most of what the Grow Network's focus, and my focus is on backyard food production. So individual and family scale, doing small gardens, small amounts of chickens, rabbits, growing half of your own food, small production on a family scale. But the purpose of the Grow Network is to stop the destruction of the earth. And this interview that I have for you today is with Ronnie Cummings, who is working at the next level to help regenerate the earth. Today I'm in beautiful San Miguel de Allende, which is in Mexico, and we've got the sounds of the city around us. But Ronnie, welcome so much, and do you want to give people a little bit of your background on who you are and what you've done with your life?
Sure, good to be with you today. My name is Ronnie Cummings, and I'm been a lifetime activist. I grew up in Texas, but I've lived all over the world. I'm the director of Organic Consumers Association, the international director, and which is a network of several million organic consumers in the U.S. and Mexico. And I'm also on the steering committee of a new project called Regeneration International.
And that's what we're going to be talking about today, Regeneration International. I just love, you're going to absolutely love the project we're talking about today, from migration to regeneration. And do you want to talk a little bit about what the issues are? We're talking about, this is going to be a little complex, but when it all comes together, you'll be amazed. So, immigrants coming into the United States from South America, it's a big problem. And you actually have a solution to help the immigration problem while at the same time regenerating the earth.
Yes, I mean, we've got lots of problems in today's modern world. Deteriorating public health, climate out of control, but we also have issues like rural poverty. I mean, there's 800 million people in the world, people have heard this, who don't have enough to eat, but there are several billion who are economically struggling to make a living. And these are the people who migrate. It's forced migration, really. Very few people want to leave their home communities and make a risky trip like it is from Mexico or Central America.
Well, can you talk about that for a minute? As I know, a lot of Americans have the perception that they're coming to America because they want to, because they want jobs or they want opportunity. But you're saying it's a forced migration?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of migrants to the U.S. From Mexico and Central America are coming because of violence in their home communities, drug gangs and cartels, but mainly because of poverty. You can't make a living any longer, especially as a small farmer in Mexico and Latin America. And there are not that many opportunities, so people have left. There's millions of people who have come to the U.S. over the last few decades, and there's millions more who are thinking about it.
And that journey is extraordinarily difficult. We think, they just hop the fence or something, but it's actually a lot more.
No, it is. I think it's starting to dawn on people, especially in Mexico, young people, that it's extremely dangerous to. Typically, your family has to raise the money to pay a smuggler to, increase your chances of actually being able to get across there. But a lot of these smugglers are connected to crime cartels. About 90% of the people who travel to the Texas or New Mexico or Arizona, California borders from deep in Mexico or Central America are robbed or raped. It's a harrowing journey. Then when you get to the border, you're often caught and thrown in jail and deported.
You have an example of a young man right here in San Miguel de Allende that had done that. He had gone.
Yeah, regularly. I've had people at my doorstep from Central America who they typically hop a freight train down at the Guatemala border, and they start traveling up through Mexico on their way to the U.S. But what happens is that these crime cartels pull everyone off the train, and they put a gun to their head and take all their valuables. They often make you, if you have a cell phone, they'll have you call your family and say, if they don't send $500 through Western Union or whatever it is, they're going to kill you. And so it's a horrible experience. And yet when you talk to these refugees, and we've got some safe houses near here where they can go to, they don't really know what to do. I mean, the reason they left home was because they couldn't make it economically, or because they were being threatened by a local gang or cartel. So they don't want to go back
to that.
They're afraid now to continue on toward the U.S. They're in a strange country. They typically are looking for food or work or anything. And so,
plus they have all the savings of their family and probably some of their village that they've just had.
They've lost.
They've lost. They have nothing.
It's a situation that really makes you realize that, you know, why are people migrating? And this isn't just, you know, in North America. I mean, a major problem in Europe is people leaving the war zones of Syria or Iraq, or the impoverished zones of Africa. I mean, so many people are leaving. It's caused a crisis in Europe. I mean, there's 300-400 million people now, refugees from their home territories. But what's important for us to realize is most of these people are from rural areas. Most of these people, if they could make a living as farmers or herdspeople, they would never leave in the first place.
They'd be quite content to stay home if they could make a decent living. I know I've interviewed some folks from Central and South America, and they really don't want to leave their families and their childhood homes and what they know is familiar, their land.
And if you talk to farm workers in the U.S., most of whom are immigrants, many without papers, they would like to return home. And what they'll tell you is, oh, I'd love to go back to Guanajuato, which is the state we're in here, but I want to have a decent job, you know? And it's, so really the key to the immigration crisis, the key is very simple. It's rural prosperity. And when you look at the United States, we are no exception. It's like our rural communities. I live in northern Minnesota in a very rural community, a good part of my time. It's like all the young people are leaving Lake County, Minnesota. And why? They say, well, because I can't get a job here. I'm going to Duluth, or I'm going to Minneapolis, St. Paul, or I'm going to Chicago. And their families they don't like this. I mean, this depopulation of rural America that's happened, especially it's accelerated over the last 30 or 40 years, this is not a good thing. We need for people to be able to go back to the land, like a lot of us did in the 60s, but they're not going to do that unless there's a way to make a living.
So Ronnie has this whole system involving regenerative agriculture and that will address this issue of rural poverty and ultimately immigration problems around the world. But first of all, Ronnie, what is regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, well, one of the ways to talk about this is, what do we have now? We have degenerative food,
this is true,
farming, and land use. We have so degenerated the fertility of our soils that food doesn't have the nutrients in it it used to be. We're all suffering in the United States and everywhere from chronic diseases. I mean, we've degenerated the environment. I mean, you're lucky if you can swim in a lake or a stream in your neighborhood. You know, we have changed the climate, people are starting to realize now. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just burning fossil fuels that have put too much CO2 in the atmosphere. It's this destructive food and farming that have taken the carbon that was once in our soils and the carbon that was once in our trees, whacked it down, and now it's in the atmosphere and the ocean.
Or in the ocean. We've run all the soil runoff and soil erosion has all gone into the ocean.
Yeah.
And another issue, people don't realize that Americans are malnourished. People think, oh, America, and you know, we're gaining weight, but that does not mean we have nutrition. The soils have been degraded so much.
Yeah, 85% of Americans are malnourished in terms of the essential vitamins and nutrients that public health people will tell you. So
what is regenerative agriculture?
Regenerative agriculture literally means what the word traditionally is has connoted, which is that you can regenerate systems to be where not only where they used to be in terms of value, but you can actually raise them. In other words, you can make soil more fertile, you can make foods more nutritious, you can make animals healthier, and at the same time, you basically can make small farmers more prosperous and ranchers. So regeneration is just, if you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthy photosynthesis that sucks down the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, puts the carbon in the soil and into the plant. And so this is a recent discovery of people that the soils contain the solution to all these problems that we're facing. And so about 3 years ago at the Climate March in New York, a group of us from around the world had a press conference at the Rodale Institute building, and we announced the formation of a new global movement called Regeneration International. And what Regeneration International is it's a group of farmers and scientists and educators and everyday people who realize that we are at the end of this degenerate era and that we have to do something about it. And what we can do about it is if we have regenerative food farming and land use, we can begin to solve not just the climate problem, we can start to solve a lot of problems. And some of these problems underlie, like, you know, we got all these wars around the world. Well, when you look more closely at, say, Syria and Iraq, I mean, what happened in Syria and Iraq? These were the traditional breadbaskets of the Middle East. You know, these are rural countries where small farmers and herdspeople could make a living. Well, they had the worst drought ever for over a decade, so they were knocked off their feet. Then we had this crazy foreign policy of the U.S. Saying that Iraq and Syria were threats to our national security. I mean, the rest of the world thought we were crazy, but we went ahead with these interventions, and so millions of people were forced from the countryside into the cities, and we have this appears to be unending war. Afghanistan is the same way. When you drill down to the places around the world where there's fundamentalist extremism and terrorism and war, what you find is that rural poverty is at the root of this, and deteriorating climate. So we really can solve not only the health problems we have and the rural poverty problems, the immigration problems, the climate problems, but we can start to address the underlying causes of conflict and war.
So we're talking about the 50,000 foot level of declarations by a group of people, but you have actually really began to make this a very concrete plan. And you have a very simple system that you've actually already developed in 2 places, and it's starting to be implemented in other places around the world. And that's involving chickens. You want to tell folks a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more animals, farm animals on the earth than there are people.
Yeah.
Most of them are confined in these factory farm conditions.
It's horrible.
Which are not only unethical and inhumane, but they produce food that's not good for our health. So what we're doing in the regeneration movement is looking around the world and looking back at our traditions. What's another way to do it besides factory farming and GMOs and all this? And when you look at poultry, what's interesting about chickens is every country in the world produces chickens. It's a traditional thing. Most of the chickens in the world are not produced in these giant poultry factories like we have in the U.S. Most of them are backyard production by small producers.
Your flock of laying hens for your
Exactly.
eggs every day.
And there's techniques that people have developed over the years that really work. So we've put this back together again, first in Minnesota, then in Mexico. It's now spreading across the world, Colombia and other places. It's basically free-range poultry where they're outside during the day. They can come into their chicken house at night, but they're outside in a paddock where there's trees or bushes.
And we've got an example here, some footage here of the implementation here in Mexico, and this is a 2-rotation paddock system with about, what is it, 2,500 birds for laying hens? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have the boys for the meat, and the girls lay the eggs, and but chickens love being outside. They love, obviously, their natural behaviors, digging around. They get part of their food or their nutrition, but they're also good for plants. They will make your corn plants grow taller. Well, why is that? Because they fertilize the plants. Why they peck around? They get insects. You know, they're digging all the time. They're aerating the soil to where it holds moisture better. They're good. They cause the life below the ground to prosper. And so, say you're raising eggs or you're raising chicken meat, if you've got hazelnuts and elderberries growing out there in the paddock as well, you've got 2 or 3 cash crops. You can feed your cost of feeding the chickens is a lot lower because they're getting a lot of their nutrition outside.
And this system that you have here in Mexico, the implementation here, although this system can be duplicated all around the world, as Ronnie's saying, they have one up in Minnesota. But in this one, you've got corn growing and sunflowers growing, and then you also have some perennials mixed in there of some olive trees because this region can grow olives. And this is a whole regenerative system because these chickens are continually adding fertility to the land. So you're getting the eggs and the meat. You're also raising some of these crops, which is offsetting the cost of your chicken feed, and then you're also building in a long-term crop of the olive production.
That's right. And also the chickens, you know, they're pooping in their chicken house in the evenings and the mornings, and you don't need that fertility out in the paddock because they already have enough there. So you're getting the material to make a lot more compost for the rest of your land, for your vegetables, for your other needs, your other trees.
So this is a system that you've developed, a regenerative agriculture, where every year after year more soil is built, it gets healthier, more vibrant, more productive, and it's a way that people who are in impoverished rural areas can actually earn a somewhat decent living. And the bonus of it is this is not something that's theoretical. This is something that you've actually implemented. You've done one system in Minnesota, you've done one system in Mexico. You've created the procedures, the paperwork. There's a whole manual on how to do this. And even though the plants and species may change in different bioregions, you know, for example, there's the elderberries up north versus olives in the south. This is something that can be rolled out across the planet almost immediately.
It is. There's some indigenous leaders from Colombia that came down to Minnesota and checked out the system, and they went back and they've set up 5 of these there. And so now we're about to roll out in a few weeks in Guatemala.
Danielle, this young man here.
Danielle, who's our poultry manager here. He's originally from Guatemala, but he's going back and he's going to be rolling out 4 systems. We managed to get some funding from a foundation in New York to get these established for the infrastructure, and then this will...
Yeah, let's talk about the funding for a second, because that's always the thing, right? You know, people can have really good ideas, but if there's no money and no support for it, then they don't go anywhere. But Ronnie actually has that part covered too in what I feel is a really brilliant way. Do you want one third, and one third, if you want to talk about the threes?
You know, don't hold your breath for the U.S. government or the Mexican Department of Agriculture or Guatemala.
We're not counting on them.
To be innovative in this funding.
Right.
But there is a way that we can bootstrap the funding ourselves. And it's basically small contributions or loans from large numbers of people or larger numbers of people. In Mexico, we have a thing called Tres por Uno, which is 3 for 1. It's a long-standing tradition where the migrants say from this area, there's a lot of people who live in Dallas, Fort Worth. The migrants will contribute a third of the money to, say, fix the church or the clinic or the school.
There is money coming into Mexico.
There's money. There's $30 billion a year coming into Mexico
from the migrants. That are there. And
that's
you're
as
saying,
big as the Petroleum Institute
gosh,
in this country, petroleum economy.
So you're saying have these migrants put for one of these projects, let's say one of these chicken projects, production projects, the migrants are willing to put up a third of the money themselves.
Yes, and then you can go to some socially responsible investors. The term in the U.S. now is impact investors. You can say, look, these migrants are willing to put this amount of money in. Will you match this? And it can be a loan. It doesn't have to be a donation, you know. And then you've got 2/3 of what you need to build your chicken house or chicken houses.
Yeah.
And you go to the local county government and you say, look, we've got 2/3 of the money here. You put in the second. Here's the books. This is going to be turning a profit within 3 years.
Yeah, so this is not grants really or gifts. This is actually a business loan.
These are business propositions.
And they'll be paying this back in 3, 4, 5 years.
Yes. And the thing about chickens is they are omnivores, so they don't just eat what's in their paddock or their area, their grazing area outside the chicken house. They need grain. If they're going to produce a lot of eggs or they're going to produce meat, they need grain. So for our operation here, for 3,500 chickens, layers, and meat chickens, we need 85 tons of grain a year. And this is not just corn, it's oats, it's wheat, and it's barley is what we use. And so, well, where do you get this 85 tons? Well, what we like about this is we can buy it from local producers. And once we enter into a relationship with a local grain producer, we can offer them technical assistance where they can be more productive. So they'll have a guaranteed sale for their crop, but they will also have people who can show them, like we've got a plow, a keyline plow, which is a sophisticated type of way to plow that's spreading across the world now. That's really a much better than the old style plows.
Yeah.
And we also know, we've learned tricks from backyard chicken growers. For example, if you germinate the grains, we germinate our barley, our oats, and our wheat. That the chickens love it, you know, and but they get more nutrition from the germinated grains than they do from just the straight grains. They eat less. You reduce your feed bill by giving the chickens germinated grains.
And that's about a 30% savings.
Yes, we're saving over 31% in the last cycle by germinating the grains.
So you're talking about more than just creating a facility for chickens in one business. You're actually talking about empowering an entire region, because not only are you creating the chicken facility, but then you're also providing steady and secure income for a whole variety of ancillary farmers who are growing grain.
Yeah. So, and I mean, organic farmers and traditional farmers have known for generations that you're much better off if you grow a variety of crops.
Yes.
Like this year in this area, there were a lot of grasshoppers, you know, who ate a lot of the corn crop. So, but these farmers that know, hey, I got a market for wheat, for barley, for oats, and corn, they're going to be better off. And in general, in the United States and in advanced industrial societies, we've gotten into this rut of chemical intensive, monoculture where the farmer grows the same thing every year and they get lousy prices for them, and the price of their inputs keeps going up. Well, the nice thing about a regenerative system, you don't have any chemical fertilizer. You're producing your own fertilizer, compost, and the animal manure in this case. You don't have expensive GMO seeds and hybrid seeds. You're using heritage seeds, open pollinated seeds from the area that are more disease resistant, drought resistant, and so on. And so we're talking about rolling out an entire system that's much more like our grandparents used to think of farming than what we're doing now.
So we're talking about regenerating almost an entire region. But can we go back for a second for that tres por uno? Because so we're talking
Yes.
about the immigrants themselves can put up a third, and then we're talking about local governments or possibly putting up another third, and conscious capitalism putting up another third. But you also had another possibility for where that income can come from and a precedent for it happening. And that
Yes.
is with the money processors.
Yes, I mean, this billions of dollars that migrants send back to their families and communities.
And it is billions
around,
every year,
oh
isn't
yeah,
it?
it's you know, Guatemala, which only has 16 million people, $7 billion a year is being sent back. Mexico, it's around 30 billion. You look at the whole world, it's $300 or $400 billion being sent back. Well, what happens is that the migrants have to pay 5% typically. In the U.S., you go to Western Union or something.
Right.
You're sending money back to your family. Say you're sending $500 back. Well, Western Union takes 20, and then when your family down here receives the money, another 5%. So 10% off the top
Oh my gosh.
is being taken by these essentially money transfer organizations who do nothing for it. I mean, they're receiving cash or a cashier's check on that end. They're not going to lose anything. So what we did in Guatemala for the Migrant Summit was we went to some of these people, like this Ban Rural, which is
Another money
a
changer.
bank in Guatemala that handle that's in rural communities. We said, look, it's not fair. You made $300 million last year on commissions, and where did you invest the money? You know, if you invested it at all in agriculture, you invested it in factory farm type installations,
Which
or
wasn't helping.
commodities.
Yeah.
It's just like, why don't you invest it back in the communities where you're getting the commission? And we were surprised to see that they had never really thought about this, that they never thought that there could be enterprises of small farmers and co-ops, and a lot of the farm leaders in these communities are women and indigenous women. They never thought about, oh, is there some way I could invest $50,000 and get my money back and get a profit and actually help the community? So I mean, you know,
And in that example in Guatemala, you actually got the money changers to donate $50,000 for a conference that you were
Yes.
putting on.
We
Like they
put-
really gave hard cash and started to transfer and see, oh, like we could be a partner in this whole process.
Yes.
Right.
They put up money, and also a group called Catholic Relief Services, a church group that is concerned about migration and poverty and so on. We've found that churches, yeah, you go talk to churches about organic food and farming or grass-fed beef, and yeah, they'll listen. But when you start talking about, you know what, we can alleviate the root causes of poverty and the violence and the drug trafficking and the forced migration and the loss of values that people, young people are taught that money is everything, family is nothing. It's like you are what you look like, what you wear, the car you drive. Churches are very concerned, a lot of them, about this. And if we're going to regenerate an ethics and a culture that is something we can be proud of instead of ashamed of, we need to create economic opportunity, especially for the young people and the women, the impoverished people. And so when the banks hear, oh, this isn't 6 or 12 chickens, in 1,000 backyards, where it would be, very hard to recover a loan.
Right.
No, this is like we're gonna create economic opportunity in the village, not only for the people who raise the chickens and process the eggs and sell them at the farmers market. No, for the people who grow the grain too. If you look at the world, our agriculture, we have 750 million farms in the world. That's a lot of farms.
It is.
If we have over 3 billion people who live on farms or in rural communities, this is nearly half of the world's population. And this is where we have forgotten these people. we have forgotten that things like climate change, yeah, we can start driving electric vehicles and switch to solar and wind, but if we don't regenerate the soil and suck down that excess carbon in the atmosphere, we're not going to restabilize the climate. Once people realize this, that the animals will save us, the small farmers will save us, the downtrodden of the earth will save us, the women who do most of the agricultural work in the world on small farms, things start to go off. The church realizes, oh yeah, I mean, backyard gardening and organics, well, this is not just some fad for city people and middle class people. These are our roots. And one of the things that we forgot in agriculture that our ancestors knew about was agroforestry. This idea of putting trees together with your crops in a mixture, like we do here with the olives and the corn and the
chickens
sunflowers.
And the sunflowers, yeah.
The tree roots going down into the soil. It's the combination of the trees and the annuals and the animals that really give you incredible soil and nutrition and so on.
So Ronnie, these projects you're already implementing them. We've already got the systems in place. We talk about some really good feasible ways of financing it that doesn't involve governments or things that are not really possible. And we're talking about the scale of this being, it's about a $30,000 investment to get this up and going in a developing country, in a village. And really, one of the things that these villagers do have is land, and it's only about a minimum of an acre, which is not that hard to come by, that these can be rolled out on. So,
yes, I mean it's nothing more than scaling up traditional backyard production, for the modern market, but using all the techniques that are available now that we've discovered or rediscovered in order to make it a viable business. And people we need to have a future where more people move out of the cities, back to the land, repopulate our rural communities, where rural communities become again what they used to be, which is that's where people wanted to live.
Yeah.
I mean, our ancestors in North America came from, a lot of them from crowded cities in Europe, and they were tired of being poor, they were tired of being persecuted, or they didn't want to be drafted to go fight in some war, so they came over, but their preferred location for a lot of them, it was rural communities.
So this is such a beautiful system because it addresses that issue of immigration, which is a huge issue across the world. It also addresses the issue of sustainability and of regenerating the earth and providing nutritious food for the peoples. And really the financing is mostly there, although definitely, I mean, even if we could help out with even just $1,000 or $5,000 in this process, how do people keep up with you in terms of what's going on and keeping up with where the latest systems are being rolled out and what the latest research that's going on with Regeneration International is? Or if somebody does have an extra $1,000 or $5,000 or $30,000, if you wanted to be somebody who sponsored one of these, how do we get in touch with you and follow you?
Go to regenerationinternational.org and you can get our daily news feed. You can also get the longer articles, in-depth articles about what's happening. This new movement is all over the world. We have affiliates now in 30 different countries, and it's growing fast because people are starting to see we got to do something different.
This is a real viable solution. This is something that's tangible and possible, and we've already seen it's practical. It's already being implemented. This is such a ray of hope.
And we're building on, this isn't some new invention that a bunch of people thought of. We're building on the organic tradition. We're building on the small farmer tradition. We're building on what our ancestors kind of already knew, which is
what our heritage
work in
is.
Rhythm with nature, and nature will take care of you. The animals are not some strange foreign creatures. There are common beings on this earth, and we need to work in combination with the animals if we're going to, survive and thrive.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for watching. I hope you've found this incredibly inspiring as I have. Get in touch with Ronnie at regenerationinternational.org.
Thank you very much.